serial murder has occurred through the centuries since the dawn of human existence. The depraved monsters who lurk among us inspire both absolute dread and an irresistible curiosity. We simply can't believe the twisted acts of horror they commit, their warped views of right and wrong, their inability to feel remorse for the lives they've taken and families they've destroyed, and their seemingly senseless thirst for blood. So today, we are going to tell you about the most ravenous cannibal serial killers. 1. Robert Mosley. Robert Mosley is an English serial killer who has spent over 25 years in an isolation cell. His cell freakishly resembles a scene out of Silence of the Lambs. Mosley refers to it as a glass cage, or concrete coffin, and he's been dubbed the real-life Hannibal Lecter. Although his spree only consists of 4 victims, one outside of prison and the other 3 while incarcerated, the brutality of his crimes have earned him a spot on this list, and you'll see why. It should also be noted here that, while no hero, Mosley made it a point to kill pedophiles specifically, which makes many wonder if the treatment he's received is actually justice. After being picked up by a pedophile who allegedly showed him the rape and abuse he'd done to previous child victims, Mosley strangled his would-be attacker to death, later earning him the nickname Blue, in reference to the color of the victim's face as Mosley strangled him to death. While incarcerated, Mosley earned the moniker Hannibal the Cannibal by killing 2 inmates and allegedly eating one man's brain with a spoon that had been fashioned into a prison shank. Note, however, that there is no proof of this. Robert Mosley has spent years in solitary confinement, completely isolated from the rest of the world, and has been dubbed Britain's most dangerous prisoner. 2. Ed Gaine. Also from Wisconsin, Ed Gaine only confessed to 2 murders and was only convicted of 1, and it's disputed whether he ate his victims, but he still fits on this list. You see, he wore people. Gaine's crimes and bizarre behavior would later be borrowed from heavily to create the 1970s slasher film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Many of Gaine's real-life horrors would show up in the character Leatherface, among others. Gaine was a shy, quiet old man who lived on a farm and had some serious issues with his mother and women in general. These issues would drive Gaine to kill 2 women in cold blood and wear their skin as masks. He also kept trophies of female vulvae and made decor from human flesh. When police descended upon Gaine's farmhouse after he'd aroused suspicion, they found the body of one of his victims, Bernice Worden, decapitated and gutted. Gaine also had a long history of grave robbing and would use pieces of the bodies he'd dug up. After committing 2 murders, Gaine was found to be insane and sent to a psychiatric institute, where he would die of cancer. 3. Peter Bryan. A lesser-known cannibal murderer who also only killed 2 people, Peter Bryan's crimes nevertheless terrify even the strongest among us. The Englishman wasn't just evil or malicious. He was clinically insane, suffering from schizophrenia. In 1993, Bryan killed a young shopkeeper, Nisha Sheth, by beating her to death with a hammer. After confessing to this, Bryan would be admitted to Broadmoor Hospital, where Robert Mosley also stayed. After several years in psychiatric care, doctors decided that Bryan was capable of returning to the community under terms of extended supervision. It was during this period of release that Peter Bryan would kill, cook, and eat his friend Brian Cherry. The police were called during an altercation the two had gotten into, in which Bryan killed Cherry with a hammer. When officers caught Bryan, he was frying Cherry's brain in a pan, allegedly with butter, and eating it, later telling police, "I ate his brain with butter. It was really nice." 4. Otis Tool. Otis Tool was a serial killer, who operated for an undetermined length of time from the 1960s to the 1980s, and who was also a brief companion to, and partner in crime of, the more infamous serial killer Henry Lee Lucas. The two stalked and terrorized Florida, leading to Tool being dubbed the Jacksonville Cannibal. Though Otis told many wild tales of homicide, which made it difficult to determine which murders were authentic and which were not, it's believed that he committed his first murder at the age of 14. He claims to have killed over 100 people. Tool was raised in a turbulent, abusive household, making later claims of incest and rape by a neighbor and his sister. The most intriguing part of Tool's childhood stemmed from his grandmother, who he claimed was a Satanist. Apparently, Tool's grandmother gave him the moniker the Devil's Child, as she showed him allegedly satanic practices such as grave robbing and self-mutilation. He would later drop hints of satanic inspiration for his killings, confessing to at least 108 total murders. Tool had a very low IQ and needed the aid of Lucas to continue undetected. During their time together, it was stated by Lucas that Tool would take his victims and cook them as a barbecue, with Lucas later recounting that he wasn't a cannibal because he didn't like the taste of Tool's barbecue sauce. The two deranged killers had a combined confession of hundreds of victims. It was said that throughout Tool's killing spree, he liked to eat the ribs of his victims and drink their blood, something Lucas seemingly disapproved of later. When asked in an interview whether he actually ate people or not, Tool replied, "You look damn tasty. If I had me a knife, I'd slit your throat and drink some blood." 5. Andrei Chikatillo. Andrei Chikatillo, the infamous butcher of Rostov, was a Soviet serial killer, whose brutal killing spree began with the murder of 9-year-old Lena Zakotnova in 1978 and turned into a reign of terror that would last over a decade. Chikatillo was an unusual serial killer, driven by a boiling rage within him from his lifelong inability to perform sexual acts. More often than not, he couldn't even have intercourse with his wife. It was from this that Chikatillo learned how to express his lust and sexual appetite through rape, torture, and violence. Even during his trial and confession to murdering 56 people, Chikatillo came uncannily close to admitting to have engaged in cannibalism, but would ultimately back down when the time came to confess to actually eating people. Chikatillo met 17-year-old Larissa Kachenko outside a public library in 1981. He overpowered Kachenko and wrestled her to the ground, strangling her to death before biting off one of her nipples and desecrating her corpse. Chikatillo would disembowel many of his victims, often removing the uterus from women, which he said he would nibble and chew on, claiming to have enjoyed the taste and texture. Many of Chikatillo's female victims were missing their uterus and nipples, both body parts Chikatillo claimed to have a particular fondness of chewing on. He even bit off one victim's tongue. Chikatillo was executed on February 16, 1994, by a single gunshot behind the right ear. So what do you think of such heinous murders? Don't forget to comment on what you think about this. For more interesting facts, stay with us, subscribe and turn on the notification by simply tapping the bell icon and selecting all. See you soon with a new video.